Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Monaco.
And I'm Bobby Salveson, and we are the Hazmat Guys, bringing you the knowledge and insight to make your job a little bit easier.
Before we get into the show, let's thank today's sponsors. For 30 years, first responders have trusted FLIR's Identifinder radiation security products to keep them safe. From PDRs to portals, FLIR delivers leading-edge solutions. Enter for your chance to win a new R100 PDR at FLIR.com/winR100.
The Hazmat Guys podcast is brought to you in part by Qualtech. Qualtech's radiation safety services support all of your rad needs. Our complete instrument service program includes calibration, repair, and tracking software, so your instruments are always ready. Learn more at Qualtech, that's spelled QALTEK.com, or 208-523-5557. All right, guys, we are back, and as the first show for this new year, 2017, thank God 2016's over, we are welcoming one of our new friends, Greg Noll, right?
Yes. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, morning, guys. How are you?
Good. We've been
Doing good.
trying to bring Greg Noll on this show for quite a while, and just the schedules is really hard to make mesh. But we finally got him to sit down for 5 minutes and tell us what exactly do you do, Greg?
Well, Mike and Bobby, first, thanks for having me on board. My friends would say that I have a career that probably demonstrates my inability to hold a job for any length of time. But that being said, I wear a lot of different hats as it relates to the emergency response community. I'm a third-generation firefighter, grew up 2 doors away from the fire station that my dad worked at. Originally come out of Reading, Pennsylvania. So I was raised around the fire service and fire apparatus. I've been in the business, if you will, for a little over 46 years now, and I've worn a lot of different hats: career firefighter, volunteer firefighter, and officer. I'm a retired E8 out of the United States Air Force Fire and Emergency Services community, and I've also done a lot of work outside of the fire service, but in the emergency services community. Since 1989, my business partner, Mike Hildebrand, and I have managed a 2-person shop, Hildebrand and Noll Associates, where we focused on emergency planning and response consulting. Most of our clients were a mixture of public safety, but also a lot in the oil and the chemical industry. So I think we bring kind of a unique perspective to the business, if you will. I've been doing it for a lot of years. That being said, a good definition of experience is the ability to survive your mistakes, and God knows I've made a lot of them.
So you're kind of new to all this.
Yeah. The one thing I can give you as an old guy is perspective.
Okay.
I'm not sure who said it, but history is essentially always repeating itself, and even in our community, there's a lot to be said for that.
So you said that one of the keys to your career was surviving your mistakes. Can you give us some insight as to probably your biggest oh crap moment? Like, everybody's got that moment in their career where they just screw up so bad that at the moment it seems like the end of the world, but in reality it was a huge life lesson that they could take with them the rest of their career. What was one of those moments for you?
Ooh, that's a long list, but I'll share with you one. We're working a job. This is when I was with Prince George's County, Maryland, and we're working a mutual aid call up in Howard County, which was before Howard County had a hazmat team. We had a box trailer on a limited access highway. Was from a chemical distribution company, had about 14, 15 different chemicals that were on board. And when you did the risk assessment, we had 3 really bad actors, and it was A plus B equals boom, A plus C equals boom, B plus C equals boom. And we've already had some type of reaction in this vehicle. So started in November, early in the day. I was the hazmat officer for a good portion of the incident. So now fast forward, it's at night. We're about 7 o'clock at night, November, it's cold. And we had brought propane salamanders out to the where the incident command post was at. And they were there primarily for what I would call ambient heating. And at this time, right just before this incident, again, keep in mind, this is like 1985, 1986. So while we had Nomex for our fire protection gear, as a hazmat team at that time, we were wearing polyester coveralls, and we had asked the leadership if we could get Nomex, and they said, yes, you can. We'll put them in for the next budget year. So anyway, fast forward, I'm standing by one of these propane salamanders, and I'm wearing polyester coveralls, and I'm thinking, man, this thing's throwing out some heat. And I look down, and my coveralls are on fire. Now, if you've never been on fire before, let me tell you, it's a very inspirational moment. So I do the, stop, drop, and roll, and I put the fire out, and I get up, and I'm looking around. I'm thinking, man, I hope nobody saw me. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So I get put in an ambulance. We go to Columbia Hospital. Now, keep in mind, very few people have seen my Richard Pryor imitation at this point of the incident. So now I'm told later from people who were on the incident, they said, yeah, we heard on the radio, firefighter burned, 2nd and 3rd degree burns, en route to Columbia Hospital. And they're all asking who got burned because they're looking at where the problem is, the tank or the tractor trailer, and everything's normal. So anyway, fast forward, I go to the hospital. And, nice thing about being a cop or fireman when you get hurt is you usually go to the front of the line when you go to the ER. So I'm in there, and fortunately for me, I had blue jeans on underneath my coveralls, or, I would have a different take on this story. But the doc's looking at me, and she's looking at my hand. She says, Greg, no big deal. All you got, some couple 2nd degree blisters. I looked at her. I said, Doc, you don't understand the beating that I'm going to be taking from the people I work with. This has nothing to do with the severity of my burns.
Yeah.
And
can I stay in this burn center for 3 months? By then, it should have died out.
The story's probably over a beer.
That's the least of my problems.
But in all seriousness, I've been very fortunate in my career to work with people who gave me opportunities to perform. And when I screwed up, they didn't lop my head off. They made it learning experiences, and I was much better for that.
Nice. I love it. I always love the oops mistakes that people love, that people learn from. One of the big things that you do is you sit on the NFPA 472 board, correct?
Correct.
Could you give us a little bit of history of the 472, what you do with it, and why it is something that people should actually know and learn as a hazmat technician or specialist?
Well, let's go in the Wayback Machine for a few moments. Mid-1980s, at that time, we're starting to see more communities that are developing hazardous materials response teams. A lot of that initial credit comes to people like Ron Gore and the Jacksonville Fire Department, which I would say were probably the first ones who really developed and pushed the concept of a hazmat response team as we know it today. But in simple terms, in the mid-1980s, there was no OSHA. There were no NFPA standards. I would say in some respects it was like the Wild Wild West in terms of hazmat response. There weren't a lot of training materials, and the training materials that did exist, a lot of those came from the chemical industry or from the environmental community, where they were being taught about and trained in the context of waste sites as compared to emergency response. So if you ask the question, what were the industry standards, if you will, in the early to mid 1980s, the answer is simple. There weren't any.
Nice.
So
kind of like what will happen after Trump takes office.
Yeah, on the positive side, what there was was a lot of grassroots sharing of information between many of the major departments and players throughout the country. So there were a lot of things going on underneath the radar screen, but at a formal industry perspective, if you will, it was, it was the old days. So 1985, 1986, there were 2 letters that were submitted to the National Fire Protection Association. One of those came from IFSTA, Fire Protection Publications at Oklahoma State University. That letter was authored by Gene Carlson, who's a well-known old name, if you will, in the hazmat community. The second letter came from the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. I was the head of the hazmat instructors section for the society at that time, and I authored the letter, which was signed by our leadership. But those 2 letters were sent to NFPA and essentially said, look, we need to have some standards that focused on planning, training, and response to hazmat incidents. And NFPA formed the committee roughly 1986.
So which one came first, 471 or 472?
Actually, 471, 472, and 473 were all together.
Ah.
So they all came down the pipeline, if you will, at the same time.
And for those listening that don't know, what is the difference between 471, 472, and 473?
Well, let me back up for a moment. And when we stood up the NFPA Technical Committee on Hazmat Emergency Response, the committee felt that there was a need for a planning document, a training document, and a procedures document. And so the procedures document was NFPA 471. And 471 is still, it was withdrawn by NFPA about 5-6 years ago after some discussions within the committee. But I think you're going to see that document come back because it's, sometimes with the benefit of hindsight, if we, and I say the NFPA committee could do things over again, we probably wouldn't have dropped 471, which as I said, we did about 5 years ago.
Oh.
But that being said, it's going to be coming back. 472 was the training document. 473 is a training document, but it's specifically focused towards EMS. And then in the planning area, the committee decided to do nothing because during that same time frame, EPA came out with 2 documents. A lot of us know it as the Orange Book and the Green Book in the planning world that really became the foundation for local government planning expectations. So,
okay. Well, now that you said that 472 kind of came out in the Wild West in the 1980s, and was all right. So 29 CFR 1910-120, which is the OSHA standard, right?
Right.
How do they interact? I mean, NFPA 472 is a guideline for, we'll say, the common sense operator out there, but the law is the CFR, right?
That's correct, and you hit it, right on the nail. 1910-120 is the law. 472 is the industry standard. Now, keep in mind, NFPA, as a standards development organization, they develop 2 types of documents. We call them either technical standards or recommended practices. In simple terms, when you're developing technical standards, regardless of what the topic is, the operative word is shall. If you are developing recommended practices, much like NFPA 471, the operative term is should. So you have that difference. The other difference, or the other, if you will, item that a lot of people don't recognize is that OSHA well, let me back up. OSHA 1910-120 was originally written by two gentlemen, Mike Moore and Tom Seymour. Mike Moore, while working at OSHA, was also a volunteer in the Maryland suburbs. Tom Seymour was a University of Maryland graduate, still teaches to this day at the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute. And both Mike and Tom attended some of the early meetings of NFPA. So the NFPA committee was already meeting before OSHA was developed. And so what they did was 1910-120, paragraph Q, at least for the training area, is based upon the early drafts of 472.
Wow.
That's why when you look at, sometimes people will say, why is there a hazmat specialist in OSHA, but not in 472? The reality is there was a specialist level in the first edition of 472, and it was taken out in the early 90s after we did a task analysis. And that would take us down a rabbit hole to get into the level of detail. But that if the answer or the question is, chicken versus egg, OSHA is based on 472.
Interesting.
Very nice. Now, who is that target audience meant for? Like, who are they looking to cover?
Well, that's an excellent question, because if you look at 472 and you look at all of our documents, they are not fire service documents. They are emergency responder to hazmat incident documents. So coming from my military background, in the military, when you use the term purple, it implies jointness, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc. NFPA 472 is a purple document. It's written for responders to hazmat incidents, regardless of what discipline they may come from. Because, you look at, as you can have cops doing hazmat, fire does most of it. You can have emergency management, public health. There's a lot of different players and disciplines when you go across the country who are involved in hazmat response.
That's interesting.
So you're really looking at pretty much anybody who is going to respond to a hazmat incident, whether you're in industry, you're the first responder world, or you're in some kind of environmental cleanup.
That's correct. Well, the environmental cleanup that's post-emergency response. So I would say that's outside of our scope. But if you're involved in emergency response, as we typically define and look at the response phase, then that falls within the target audience of our documents.
Okay. Well, we've had these conversations with people where we have one of the guys on another one of our shows who is the director of EMS for a county in Indiana, and he is an EMS only department, and he asked, well, it wasn't him, but his employees asked him if he is underneath 472 or 473, and my interpretation, you correct me please, is that he's under both.
Yeah, again, 473 was specifically targeted towards EMS providers who may respond to hazmat incidents. And essentially, without getting into the weeds, what it says is that, first of all, you shall be trained to the ops level. And then secondly, you shall have these additional, what I would call EMS-focused skills and competencies. Now, over the years, 473 has evolved. If you look at the latest edition of 473, it's structured along the lines of BLS and ALS. And then we also have some mission-specific competencies that are included.
Interesting.
Very nice, very nice. Now, based upon that, is this kind of the reason why the wording firefighter, technician, and specialist is now just kind of encompassing responder?
Well, Yeah. When you look at the document, we use the term emergency responders. And of course, we break that into the categories of awareness, which frankly, the technical committee does not look at awareness people as emergency responders. If you're an emergency responder, we see you falling into operations and higher. And if you want to, if you want the Mickey the Mope definition of emergency responder, here's what I typically say. If somebody dials 911 and is reporting an incident or an emergency, and you're the guy that shows up, you're an emergency responder.
Got it. That makes sense.
So all emergency responders are supposed to be brought to the operations level?
Yeah, although here's where here's one of the challenges I think we have in the regulatory community. OSHA 1910-120 is clearly the law. It was written, the interim rule was written in 1986. The final rule was published, I think, in 1989. But it reflected the hazmat community as we knew it at that time. So if you fast forward over the last 25 years, think about the things that we have today that we didn't have in 1989, 1990. Terrorism, weapons of mass destruction. We've seen significant changes in our energy infrastructure.
Right.
And the reality is we've seen all these changes, but we haven't seen any changes in the regulations.
Yeah.
So if you compare NFPA 470, the NFPA hazmat documents are now going in their 5th update since they were originally updated or developed. Compare that to OSHA, which reads the same language today as it did essentially in 1989.
Wow. It's like the Constitution.
Yeah, no joke. Now, does OSHA standards just not get updated as regularly, or is it just literally an act of Congress to do that?
Well, this gets into kind of inside baseball. Keep in mind that now, let me say, first of all, there have been discussions in the emergency response community on the need to update OSHA 1910-120. I've heard those discussions in IAFC circles with their hazmat committee. I also sit on the interagency board. I can tell you we've had those conversations in the IAB. But 1910-120 actually covers 4 different audiences. It covers emergency response, which is obviously our focus, but it also covers those who are involved in waste cleanup operations or post-emergency response. It covers those who work at treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. And it covers those who work at environmental cleanup scenarios. So of the 4 audiences, if you will, that OSHA covers, 3 of them are relatively stable. In other words, their world really hasn't changed much in the last 25 years. Some of the technology has, but in terms of the basic how they do business from a health and safety perspective, it's not a lot different. And so if OSHA opens up the rule, they can't just say we're going to open up paragraph Q, which is emergency response. They have to open up the entire document. And, Washington and politics being what it is, while we in the emergency response community may feel that it needs to be reopened, there are other stakeholders out there who would disagree with that and have a different perspective. Not to say that one's right and one's wrong. It's just different perspectives.
FLIR, a global leader in CBRNE detection solutions, has exciting news for Hazmat Nation. FLIR is giving away one of its new Identifinder R100 personal radiation detectors each month in 2017. Enter for your chance to win at FLIR.com/winR100. This rugged PRD delivers immediate threat alarms to keep frontline responders safe. It also features integrated Bluetooth connectivity that enables situational awareness beyond the front line and up the chain of command. It is IP67 rated to protect against dust, is water submersible up to 1 meter, and drop test compliant to 1.5 meters. For over 30 years, first responders have trusted FLIR's Identifinder radiation security products to keep them safe and prepared. Over 20,000 instruments are fielded globally. From personal radiation detectors to portals, FLIR delivers leading-edge solutions for our first responders. Remember to visit FLIR.com/WinR100 to win.
So what is then going to be new in NFPA 472?
Well, this about we're now wrapping up the next edition of 472. But I think before I can answer your question with 472, I also have to throw another standard into the discussion, and that's NFPA 1072.
Okay.
Within NFPA, there are approximately a dozen committees that have what I will call a competency-based standard and a comparable JPR, job performance requirement standard. For example, to put this in the context of the hazmat programs, NFPA 472 is a competency-based standard.
Okay.
So if I am putting together a hazmat curriculum, it's probably the document that I'm going to use. NFPA 1072, which is now, should be coming out, it's in the final portions of the NFPA cycle for approval. NFPA 1072 was specifically requested to be developed from the stakeholders in the training community. And they view JPRs as their tool, which are used for the certification of individuals. So when you think about certification, now you're getting more into the testing process, if you will. Mm-hmm. We're not the advantage that we have as a hazmat committee is that we own both of those documents. So in our committee, we view, for lack of a better term, 472 as the parent and 1072 as the child. So those two documents have to philosophically, as well as realistically, have to line up with each other.
Okay.
If you go into some other areas, like in USAR, there's a competency document and a JPR document, but they're done by two different committees. So that creates some additional struggles, if you will, that fortunately we don't have in the hazmat world.
That's actually really good, right?
Yeah. So if you look at, your operative question is, okay, what's new in the pipeline? Take away the JPR process. The things that are coming down the pipeline in the next editions of both 472 and 1072 are not what I would call substantial philosophical changes like we saw in 2004 and 2008. 2004, 2008, we rolled out mission-specific competencies. That was a whole new way of doing business. There aren't significant changes, if you will, for this round of documents.
Okay. Well, I mean, as far as the JPRs, are there things coming out like metering or containers or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, your questions are good, and they go back to two specific conversations.
Okay.
The first conversation, let's talk about containers. Obviously, if I'm a firefighter, being able to apply dome clamps onto a 306, 406 is probably something that's high on my list of to-dos.
Okay.
High probability I'm going to be asked to do that task in the field. On the other hand, if you're not in a public safety hazmat team and you're not dealing with 306s, 406s, the probability of you putting on dome clamps is probably going to be less. So how do you come up with a competency that meets, frankly, the needs of both of those communities? So what we did in this new edition is that we didn't say what type of container specifically an individual had to be able to apply leak control equipment on. What we said is this. You have to do these three things. You have to be able to control a leak from a bulk or non-bulk pressure container. So you could use a chlorine kit, or you could use a 1,000-pound propane cylinder if that's what's in your world.
Okay.
As long as you're doing it on a pressurized container that your authority having jurisdiction approves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in liquids, we say, okay, you have to be able to control a leak from a non-bulk liquid container or its closures. And again, that could be a 55-gallon drum, or it might be something else. And you have to be able to control a leak from a bulk liquid container. So if you want to do that with dome clamps on a 406, that's great. On the other hand, if you want to do something different on a bulk fixed tank, you could do that as well. So we're not specifically saying you have to do A, B, C. We're giving you some options based upon what are the hazards and risks that you face within your community.
So you're really taking the responsibility and placing it on the authority having jurisdiction to train their people as to what is in their area. My question then is, what if you have an incident in which somebody now, I've been trained only to do chlorine A kits because that's what travels through my AHG all the time, and suddenly I'm faced with an incident in which I now have to apply a dome cover clamp, and I can't because I haven't been trained to that. Does that responsibility now fall back on the authority having jurisdiction, saying, "Hey, listen, you should have trained them"?
The points that I just alluded to only deal with skills. So within the document, you have knowledge. What do I need to know? Versus skill. What do I need to perform? What do I need to perform as part of the testing process? Okay. So you still should have the knowledge competencies to be able to allow you to do your hazard and risk assessment and make that problem go away. Or if you, and again, part of the risk assessment maybe is, hey, this is out of our skill set. We need to bring in a technical specialist or a SME to help us with this specific operation.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
As far, and another one of these JPRs that I think, and you can answer this a little better than I can, is the monitoring and detection. This was, I guess, prior to 2004 when it was really shifted gears to mission specific. We had firefighters that were going into carbon monoxide alarms with a meter, and some of the purists would say, well, that's not an operations level skill, that's a technician level, but that's been addressed, right, in 2004?
Well, there's two separate things. Your question really relates to two different points.
Oh.
The first point is mission specific, and you're absolutely spot on. When we did, let me back up. When myself and Charlie Wright, who's now retired from the Union Pacific Railroad, we chaired the internal work group that was put together in 2004 to develop the mission-specific competencies. And we had some, what I would call, foundational elements that guided our discussion. The first one and the biggest one is that people should be trained to perform their expected tasks. It's not what box do you fall into, but are you trained to do the tasks that your AHJ requires you to do? So one of the challenges in the mission-specific discussions was the fact of, and you alluded to it, how can you take an operations level responder and give them a piece of equipment and ask them to do the same things that a tech does without having the benefit of the additional training and expertise that a tech brings to the table?
Right.
And so what we came up with is that mission-specific individual can perform those tasks as long as they are essentially, A, written down in paper in terms of their policies and procedures that says what they can and what they can't do. In other words, what's the box or the rules of engagement that an ops person can play within? The second one is you could be working for a hazmat technician, or third, you could be working for what we call I'm going to say qualified individual. That's not the right term. I'm getting a senior moment here. But essentially, you're working for a SME, subject matter expert, or a technical specialist in that area. So you can do the task, but you're working for someone, or you have policies and procedures that lay out the additional knowledge requirements that you would be needed to do those tasks.
Right, and that can interpret what you're throwing out there.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're setting people up to fail, quite frankly, because you're giving them a widget saying, okay, you're trained on this widget. Now go out and do whatever you're supposed to do. Well, it doesn't work like that. You got to have that. Again, I use the term rules of engagement, but what's the box that I, as an ops level person, work within while I perform these technician level skills or use this equipment? So
So you're really providing a
large
tremendous amount of flexibility to the operations levels guys by allowing them to operate almost like an arm of a technician.
Absolutely. Now your second question dealt with the list of monitoring equipment or capabilities, if you will, and this is changing in the upcoming documents. Over the last, as you guys well know, since post 9/11, we have seen a tremendous growth in the different types of not skills, but capabilities of monitoring equipment. And a lot of that has been driven by DHS and military dollars, particularly in the WMD level. But over the last 15 years since 9/11, we've seen this tremendous growth in new types of monitoring and detection equipment that is routinely being used by all responders, but particularly by hazmat teams. Well, initially, what we tried to do is lay out competencies that focused on the types of technology. And that worked in the short term, but after 10 years, we have a list that's about, 15 different technologies that are in the standard. And we had a discussion in the committee and, just going around the room and say, okay, how many people in this room can physically say that they're competent and qualified in all these technologies? And as you would expect, everybody's hand didn't go up or even close to it. So the question then became, okay, let's take a step back and let's go back to our basic discussions. What specific skills do we feel that a hazmat technician should possess in the area of monitoring and detection? And the result of that discussion was some basic requirements, both skill and knowledge, that focused on colorimetrics, regardless of whether you're looking at tubes or reagents. It focused on electrochemical cells, which we see for toxic gases, LEL, UEL, flammable gas, non-contact thermal detection devices, O2, PIDs, photoionization detectors, and then basic bio, but only if bio is provided by your jurisdiction. So, and then also basic RAD. So instead of trying to have this list du jour of different technologies, we took a step back and tried to, frankly, make it more realistic for what's really going on in the real world.
That's awesome. It's because you know what? It's real. I gotta say, it's refreshing, actually.
Well, because so many times that we look at something and we go, wow, that's how they want us to do it, but there's no way that we can actually operate like that. Yeah.
And, as an old guy, I've been on the committee since its inception in '86. I've been the chair for the last 10 years. I'm here to tell you, we don't always get it right the first time around. There aren't many, but there are some things where NFPA 471 is the perfect example where we made decisions which at the time seemed like good decisions based on the information that was available. And then we go back with the passage of time and go back and look at it and we say, what the hell were we thinking? So.
One more question we got for you is that we try to keep our ears pretty close to the ground. We heard rumor of 2 more standards that might be of interest to our listeners, and it was NFPA 475 and 1475. Are they out there? Do they matter to us? Do you know anything about these?
Well, I can't. 1475 isn't in my world, so but 475 is one of our documents, and it's a recommended practice. And think of it in this context. 475 would be used in this context. If you're an officer or you're an individual who is charged with the responsibility for managing a hazmat emergency response program, what do I need to know? What do I need to focus on?
So this is like for schools.
It's a recommended practice, and we intentionally try to ensure that 475 also parallels the Special Ops Program Management course that is conducted at the National Fire Academy. So, and a lot of the folks who were involved in that working group were also involved or teaching the Special Ops Program Management. So it's Program Management 101 for simplicity.
Interesting. We'll have to go down that road again another time when it finally comes out for reading.
When it's out and about.
Yeah, actually, you should see that probably here after the first of the year. Within the first half of 2017, it'll be on the street.
Excellent. Now, Greg, since you are sitting in a house full of people baking, what is your favorite Christmas cookie?
Oh, it doesn't take much to satisfy me. I'm a chocolate chip guy, and I like the sprinkles. The regular dough with the sprinkles on. I mean, my wife, unfortunately, these women make all these cookies that half of them, all the guys in the house say, "What's this? What's this?" As compared to, just give us the basics here, chocolate chip. You can never go wrong.
I'm sorry, Greg. We were looking for gingerbread cookie. That was the correct answer. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us and sharing a very small part of the knowledge and the world that you do. If anybody had any questions for you, where would our listeners be able to find you?
Probably the easiest is just drop me an email. My email address is ggnoll@me.com, maryecho.com, or the Apple family, if you will.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much.
Where else can we find any information about upcoming standards and guidelines? I understand, let's say that our listeners really want to listen or read 472. From what my understanding is that you have to buy them, or your authority having jurisdiction can get one copy for free. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's more. I can research and give you the official answer to that. Typically, you can go. I know historically the hazmat standards were available on the NFPA website. You could get a copy to look at and reference. So I would start at the NFPA website, because historically they have had situations where some of their standards were available to the emergency response community.
All right. Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming on the show for a short little time that you were.
Hey, I appreciate the invite. Sorry it took us so long to pull this off, but hope you guys have a great new year and stay safe and be good.
You as well. We look forward to hopefully many more interviews with you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Hazmat Guys.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel at the Hazmat Guys. And take a moment to call our comment hotline at 843-628-1484.
We are always looking forward to your feedback about information or interesting incidents that you are part of. So send us a note at feedback@thehazmatguys.com.
And remember, guys, don't just get on the job, get into the job.